The desert stretched out endlessly, a vast, golden sea of sand. The sun beat down mercilessly, its heat radiating off the earth, shimmering in the distance. It was a place of both beauty and danger, silent and unforgiving. In the heart of this unyielding wilderness, a lone car hummed along the narrow, dusty road, kicking up clouds of fine sand in its wake. Inside, the soft hum of the engine was the only sound, as Sanam gripped the wheel with both hands, her brow furrowed in concentration. Beside her, Sophia, her young daughter, stared out of the window, watching the landscape pass by. The car's tires rolled over the dry, cracked road, the desert a barren expanse that seemed to go on forever. To the left, a cluster of cacti stood still, their spines casting long, sharp shadows against the golden sands. To the right, jagged rocks jutted from the earth like ancient sentinels, weathered by time and the harsh sun. "How much longer, Mom?" Sophia asked, breaking the silence. Her voice was tinged with curiosity, though there was an edge of apprehension. The desert, despite its beauty, made her uneasy. "Not much longer," Sanam replied, her eyes flicking from the road to Sophia, a reassuring smile on her face that didn't quite reach her eyes. The journey had been long, and the isolation of the desert made her feel an uncomfortable sense of vulnerability. But this trip was important. They were almost there. The car suddenly sputtered, the engine coughing violently before stalling with a final, defeated wheeze. Sanam's heart skipped a beat as she turned the ignition again, but the engine refused to start. Panic surged in her chest, but she forced herself to stay calm. The desert was an unforgiving place, and they couldn't afford to panic. "What's wrong, Mom?" Sophia asked, her voice trembling as she looked at the dashboard. The car's warning lights flickered on, but Sanam had no idea what they meant. Sanam gave the wheel a few more half-hearted turns, but there was nothing. The silence that followed felt overwhelming. Outside, the sun was still high in the sky, and the vast emptiness of the desert surrounded them on all sides. There was no sign of life, no sign of help. "Don't worry, sweetheart," Sanam said, trying to mask the anxiety in her voice. "I'll check the engine. Stay in the car, okay?" Sophia nodded, though her eyes betrayed the worry she was trying to hide. She could feel the weight of the isolation settling in, the vastness of the desert pressing down on them. The idea of being stranded here, alone, was terrifying. Sanam opened the car door and stepped out, shielding her eyes from the blazing sun. Sweat trickled down her neck as she lifted the hood of the car. The engine looked intact, but there was nothing obvious she could fix on her own. She kicked the tire in frustration. They were stuck, and the desert had a way of making even the smallest inconvenience feel like an impending disaster. Minutes turned into hours, and the sun began its slow descent, casting long shadows over the desert. Sanam had tried everything, checking the engine, adjusting the wires, even checking the spare tire. Nothing worked. The heat was unbearable, and their water bottles were almost empty. She wiped the sweat from her forehead, frustration growing. Sophia, sitting quietly in the passenger seat, had become restless. She stared out the window, fidgeting with her hands. Finally, she broke the silence. "I'm thirsty, Mom." Her voice was soft, but there was an underlying edge of impatience. The air in the car had become thick, the air conditioner useless in the sweltering heat. "I know, baby. I'll find us some water soon," Sanam replied, but even she could hear the uncertainty in her own voice. Sophia gazed out of the window again, her eyes scanning the barren landscape. There was something about the desert that seemed to draw her in, something mysterious, something otherworldly. She had always been a curious child, constantly asking questions, wanting to know more. "Mom," she said, her voice now more confident. "There's a little shack over there." Sanam looked up, following her daughter's gaze. Off in the distance, barely visible through the heat waves, was a small, weathered structure. It was a tiny cabin, almost invisible against the vastness of the desert. Sanam hesitated. No, stay here, Sophia. We need to stay together. But Sophia was already out of the car, her curiosity getting the better of her. It's not far, Mom. I'll be right back. Before Sanam could stop her, Sophia was already walking toward the cabin. Sanam shouted after her. Sophia, wait. Come back. But Sophia didn't hear her. She was too focused on the shack, on the promise of something, anything, that could help them in this deserted place. Sanam's heart pounded in her chest as she watched her daughter's small figure get farther and farther away. Don't go, please, Sanam whispered to herself, her voice catching in her throat. The desert had a way of swallowing up everything, even the smallest signs of life. And in that moment, Sanam realized how vast and empty this place truly was. Sophia kept walking, unaware of the growing danger that lay ahead. The further she went, the more isolated she became, the desert now fully embracing her in its harsh, silent arms. As the minutes ticked by, Sanam's worry deepened. She took a few steps forward, her eyes never leaving Sophia's retreating back. Sophia, please, she begged, but the wind carried her words away, leaving nothing but the sound of the desert. Then, in an instant, Sophia was gone. Completely out of sight. Sanam's heart stopped. Sophia's footsteps were hesitant, the sand shifting beneath her feet with every step. The dry heat clung to her skin, and sweat poured down her face as she trudged through the desert. She hadn't planned to wander this far. It had just seemed like a short walk to investigate the shack she had spotted in the distance. But as the minutes passed, and the small structure remained elusive, Sophia began to realize how much farther she had strayed from the car. With every step, the heat seemed to intensify, weighing down on her small frame. She wiped her forehead with the back of her hand, but it did little to cool her skin. Her water bottle had long since emptied, and the harsh desert air only made her thirst grow more intense. She could feel her mouth dry, her throat scratchy, but the thought of stopping to rest seemed impossible. She had to keep moving, she had to find help. The sun beat down relentlessly, and Sophia squinted against the glare. The landscape stretched endlessly in every direction, nothing but sand, scrub, and an occasional patch of dry earth. The air shimmered in the distance, making it hard to tell where the horizon ended and the sky began. Every direction looked the same. She couldn't tell if she was going forward or circling in a useless pattern. She stumbled, her legs weak from exhaustion, but she pushed on, determined to find the shack. Her mind raced with thoughts of her mother. What if something had happened to her? What if she had to find her way out of this desert alone? A sharp pain bloomed in her chest as panic began to set in. What was she supposed to do now? The cabin felt so close, yet it was so far away. Her breath came in short gasps, her body desperate for respite, but her resolve was unyielding. She had to find it. She had to find the way home. The sun was now low on the horizon, casting long shadows across the desert. Sophia's feet were raw, her skin burned from the scorching heat. She was starting to feel the weight of her decision, the reality of her situation settling over her like a thick fog. She had walked so far, farther than she should have, and now the sun was setting. She wasn't sure where she was anymore, but one thing was certain, she was lost. She paused for a moment, her breath ragged as she scanned the horizon, looking for anything familiar. But there was nothing. The desert was a sea of endless sand, and she was a tiny speck, swallowed by its vastness. The cabin was nowhere in sight. The realization hit her like a punch to the gut. She had no idea which direction to go in. Every direction seemed the same. She sat down on a large, flat rock, the rough surface scratching at her legs. She pulled her knees up to her chest and wrapped her arms around them. Her heart thudded painfully in her chest, and a lump formed in her throat. Her mind raced. What would her mother think if she knew how far Sophia had gone? She had promised her mother that she would stay close. And now Now she was alone in the middle of the desert with no way to find her way back. Her stomach growled, a reminder of how little food she had eaten that day. Her mouth was dry, her lips cracked from the heat, but there was no relief in sight. The sun was fading, and soon the desert would be swallowed by darkness. Suddenly, a strange sound cut through the air, distant, faint, but unmistakable. It was the sound of a vehicle. Sophia's head shot up, her heart racing with hope. She pushed herself to her feet, looking around frantically, trying to locate the source of the sound. Her eyes scanned the desert, but all she could see were endless dunes and dry patches of earth. "Mom," she whispered, but the words seemed swallowed by the vast emptiness around her. There was no one in sight. No vehicle. The sound had vanished as quickly as it had come. A cold shiver ran down her spine. Maybe she was hearing things. She stood there for a moment longer, uncertain of what to do next. The desert had an uncanny way of playing tricks on your mind. Sophia took a deep breath and forced herself to walk forward, hoping that the sound hadn't been an illusion, that somehow, there was help out there, just beyond the horizon. The air grew thick with tension as Sophia's feet carried her onward. She had no destination in mind, only a desperate desire to get out of the desert, away from the oppressive heat, away from the unyielding silence that seemed to mock her. She wasn't sure how long she had been walking, time had lost its meaning out here, but when she finally stumbled upon a small shack, her heart leaped in her chest. It was the same shack she had seen earlier from the car. It looked weathered, almost abandoned, but at least it was something. "Hello?" Sophia called, her voice cracking with both fear and hope. There was no answer, but the door of the shack creaked open as though inviting her inside. Her legs carried her forward without hesitation, the promise of shelter and maybe even water spurring her on. But as she stepped closer, a figure emerged from the shadows of the doorway. A woman. Tall, thin, with a stern expression that matched the harshness of the desert around them. Her eyes were cold, fixed on Sophia as if sizing her up. Sophia froze, unsure of what to do. She had been raised to trust people, to believe that kindness existed in the world. But something about the woman felt wrong. There was a wildness in her eyes, something untamed, as though she didn't belong in this world, or perhaps the world didn't belong to her. "What are you doing here?" the woman demanded, her voice sharp, cutting through the air like a blade. She took a step forward, her face hard and unreadable. Sophia swallowed nervously, unsure how to respond. I got lost," she stammered. "I was just looking for water." The woman's eyes narrowed, her lips curling into a thin, displeased line. "Lost, huh? Well, you've come to the wrong place. This land belongs to me. You have no business here." Sophia's heart began to race as she took a step back, sensing the danger in the woman's voice. "I didn't mean any harm. The woman cut her off. "No one comes here unless they're a threat. You think I'll let some stranger wander around my land?" The air around them grew thick with tension. Sophia's instincts screamed at her to leave, to run. But her legs were frozen, her body betraying her. The woman's gaze didn't soften, instead, she took another step forward, her presence suffocating. "I didn't mean to trespass," Sophia whispered, taking another hesitant step backward. "Please. I just need help." But the woman's expression didn't change. She stared at Sophia, as if trying to read her, as if seeing through her. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, she spoke. "Help? You think I'll help you?" she sneered. "No one helps here. Especially not when it comes to protecting what's mine." And with that, the woman turned and walked back into the shack, leaving Sophia standing alone, her heart pounding in her chest, with the unsettling feeling that she had just entered a world far more dangerous than she had imagined. Sophia hesitated for a moment, but the sense of impending danger pushed her to make a decision. She turned and began to run, the harsh desert sands beneath her feet and the sound of the woman's cold laughter echoing in her ears. The desert had claimed her, and it was determined not to let her go. Sanam's hands gripped the steering wheel tightly, her knuckles pale against the leather. The sun had dipped lower, casting a reddish glow across the desert. The golden sands, once beautiful and serene, now felt like a vast and unforgiving sea. Every minute she drove in search of her daughter, the fear gnawed at her insides. She had been calling Sophia's name, but the silence that followed was deafening. The car had been parked for hours, now surrounded by nothing but the expansive, lonely wilderness. She could feel her chest tighten with every passing second. The desert, in its vast emptiness, offered no comfort. The air was still, almost oppressive, and the heat was relentless even as evening approached. "Where are you, Sophia?" Sanam muttered to herself, her voice barely more than a whisper in the quiet car. Her eyes scanned the horizon as she drove further, hoping to catch sight of her daughter. Her mind raced, replaying every second since the car had broken down, remembering the way Sophia had wandered off toward that distant shack. Sanam had told her to stay close, but the pull of curiosity had led her away, further into the desert, further into danger. Sanam's phone, useless for calling for help, sat next to her, its screen black and silent. The car's breakdown had left them stranded with no way to communicate, no way to call for assistance. She had no choice but to search on foot. Every part of her screamed that something was wrong, but what could she do? Suddenly, Sanam's heart skipped a beat. Her gaze caught something on the horizon, a flicker of movement, too far to be certain, but it was there. The blood rushed to her head as her mind screamed in a frantic whirl of thoughts. Could it be Sophia? Had she found help? Sanam slammed her foot on the accelerator, the tires kicking up dust as she sped toward the figure in the distance, her heart thundering in her chest. As Sanam raced across the desert, Karen stood on the porch of the shack, watching her every move. From her vantage point, she could see the mother's frantic driving, her desperation clear in the way she weaved between the dunes. Karen's lips curled into a tight, knowing smile. She had seen this coming, the girl's intrusion, the mother's helplessness. This land was hers, and no one, not even a lost child, was allowed to trespass without facing the consequences. She was a protector, a keeper of what she believed was rightfully hers. The shack, the land, the very air she breathed, these were hers to guard, and she would do anything to ensure no one took them from her. There was no room for kindness in this place, no room for compassion. Not anymore. Her eyes narrowed as Sanam's car came closer. She had been watching them for hours, waiting for the right moment, watching the young girl wander off, alone and vulnerable. Karen had always hated outsiders, but something about Sophia's innocence, the curiosity in her eyes, her quiet defiance, had stirred something in her. But now, seeing the mother's desperate attempts to retrieve her daughter, Karen's obsession deepened. They were a threat to her, these strangers, wandering into her world like they had a right to be there. They didn't understand this land, this desert. It was hers, and it always would be. As the car approached, Karen's hand went to the gun strapped at her side, the cool metal a reassuring weight in her palm. It was time to end this. No one would take her land. No one would take anything from her. Sanam's car screeched to a halt in front of the shack, her heart racing in her chest. She leapt out of the vehicle, her eyes scanning the area frantically, looking for her daughter. "Sophia," she called out, her voice hoarse with worry. The silence that followed felt like a slap in the face. She stepped forward, her breath shallow, her heart pounding in her ears. The shack loomed before her, dark and foreboding. The door creaked on its hinges as a figure stepped out, tall and imposing, a woman with cold eyes and a wild air about her. Sanam's breath caught in her throat as she recognized the woman, the one Sophia had been heading toward earlier. The woman's gaze locked onto Sanam with an intensity that made her skin crawl. "What do you think you're doing here?" the woman demanded, her voice sharp, laced with hostility. Sanam stood frozen for a moment, unsure of how to respond. Her mind raced. I'm looking for my daughter. She's lost, she explained, her voice shaking with the weight of the words. Please, I need your help. Have you seen her? The woman's lips twisted into a tight smile, though there was no warmth in it. Your daughter? She wandered onto my land. Now she's the one who has to answer for it. Sanam felt a cold shiver run down her spine. She's just a child. She didn't mean any harm. She took a step forward, her hands raised in a gesture of pleading. Please, I just need to find her. The woman's eyes darkened, a flash of something dangerous flickering behind them. You think I care about your lost child, she spat, her words cutting through the air. This land doesn't welcome strangers. And neither do I. Before Sanam could speak, the woman reached for something from behind her, pulling out a weapon, an old revolver, gleaming coldly in the fading light. Sanam's eyes widened as she stepped back, her hands instinctively raising in a protective gesture. Stay back, the woman warned, her tone final. I'll do whatever it takes to protect what's mine. You're both a threat to me. Sanam's heart raced, and her breath caught in her throat. Her daughter was out there somewhere, and now, she was standing in front of a madwoman, who not only posed a threat to Sophia but to her as well. The weight of the situation hit her like a slap to the face, but she couldn't afford to back down now. Please, Sanam pleaded, her voice steadying despite the fear coursing through her veins. You don't have to do this. I just want my daughter back. But Karen's smile only widened, an unsettling, chilling expression on her face as she took a step forward, the barrel of the gun steady in her hand. You should have stayed away, lady. The first confrontation had arrived, and neither woman was willing to back down. Sophia's heart thudded in her chest as she took another step back, her eyes fixed on Karen, the woman now holding a gun with an unnerving steadiness. The desert air felt heavy, as though the world had paused in anticipation. She could feel the heat seeping through her clothes, the dryness of the sand beneath her feet, but nothing compared to the cold, paralyzing fear coursing through her veins. Her mouth was dry, her body trembling with the urge to run, but her legs felt like they were made of lead. What was happening? Why had this woman, this stranger, become so angry? The questions spun around her mind, but none of them made sense. All Sophia knew in that moment was that she was standing in the middle of a desert, facing a woman who seemed willing to do anything to protect something Sophia couldn't understand. Please, please, I don't want any trouble, Sophia whispered, her voice shaking as she glanced around for any sign of help. The vast emptiness of the desert stretched endlessly in every direction, mocking her, telling her there was nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. Karen's eyes were like ice, cold and calculating, and for a moment, Sophia wondered if she could reason with her. But the chilling look in the woman's eyes told her all she needed to know. There was no room for reason here. The gun was still aimed at her, and each second that passed felt like an eternity. Sophia's mind raced, trying to think of an escape, any way out of this, but the more she thought, the more the desert seemed to close in around her. Don't move, Karen's voice broke through her thoughts, sharp and commanding. I'll make sure you understand the consequences of trespassing here. Sophia's breath caught in her throat, her instinct screaming at her to run, but where? She was alone in the desert, surrounded by nothing but endless sand and a dangerous woman with a weapon. She could feel the weight of the gun, the coldness of the metal pressing against her chest, making it impossible to breathe. The seconds stretched into what felt like hours. Sophia stood frozen, her gaze locked on Karen, the barrel of the gun unwavering. Her chest rose and fell rapidly, each breath shallow and erratic as she tried to steady herself, to find the courage to act. She couldn't afford to panic, not now. She needed a plan. She needed to find a way to survive this. Please, Sophia said again, her voice barely above a whisper. I didn't mean to trespass. I just got lost. My mom's out there looking for me. Karen's eyes flickered for a brief moment, but there was no compassion there, no sign of understanding. The woman's face remained as cold and hard as the desert around them. "Your mom should have taught you better," she sneered, taking a step forward, her boots crunching on the sand. "She should have known better than to bring a child here, into my land. You're nothing but a threat." Sophia flinched at the words, her mind struggling to make sense of the situation. Threat? What threat? She was just a lost girl, trying to find her way back. But in Karen's eyes, Sophia had become something much worse. A trespasser. An intruder. Karen took another step forward, closing the gap between them, her expression twisting with anger. "You think I don't know what you're doing here? Trying to take what's mine?" The fear inside Sophia began to morph into confusion and disbelief. What was this woman talking about? What was hers to protect? She was just a child. But as Karen spoke, Sophia could see the obsession in her eyes, the manic need to protect something that Sophia couldn't even see. It was as if the land itself had become Karen's sole focus, her only reason for living. And anyone who dared to cross it, to wander too close, would pay the price. Sophia felt her throat tighten as she struggled to find the right words, anything that might make Karen see sense. "I don't want any trouble, I promise. I just need help. Please, let me go. My mom's out there, and she'll come looking for me soon." But Karen wasn't listening. She was lost in her own world, consumed by the need to protect something that Sophia couldn't understand. Her grip on the gun tightened, and her face hardened even further. "No one takes what's mine," she muttered under her breath, her eyes narrowing. "No one." In that moment, Sophia realized there was no way to talk her way out of this. There would be no understanding, no mercy. This wasn't a woman who cared about what was right or wrong. This was a woman who was consumed by something darker. And Sophia was just another casualty of that obsession. The weight of the situation crashed down on Sophia as Karen continued to advance, the barrel of the gun never leaving her. With each step Karen took, Sophia could feel the panic welling up inside her, a rising tide of terror that threatened to overwhelm her. "Please," Sophia begged again, her voice trembling, but Karen didn't answer. The woman was too focused on the land, on protecting it, to see Sophia as anything more than an enemy. Sophia's eyes flicked nervously to the gun, the cold, dark metal gleaming under the harsh desert sun. It felt like the gun was the only thing that mattered here, the only thing Karen truly cared about. The weapon was an extension of her obsession, and as long as it was aimed at Sophia, there was no way out. "You're a threat," Karen said again, her voice low and seething with contempt. "And I can't have you running around, causing trouble. You should have stayed away." The sound of Karen's voice sent a chill down Sophia's spine. The woman was talking as if Sophia had committed some terrible crime, as if she had crossed some invisible line that couldn't be undone. Sophia's thoughts raced. She couldn't stand here and wait for Karen to make her move. She had to act. But what could she do? The gun was too close, and Karen was too unpredictable. Suddenly, Karen raised the gun, pointing it directly at Sophia's chest. Sophia froze, her breath catching in her throat as her mind screamed at her to move, to run, to do anything, but she couldn't. Her body refused to cooperate, paralyzed by fear. "Stay still," Karen warned, her voice cold, her eyes narrowing. "I'll do what I have to." Sophia's heart raced. She had no choice now. She could feel her body shaking, every instinct screaming at her to run, to escape, but the fear of the gun, of what Karen might do next, held her in place. She couldn't understand why this woman was doing this, why she was so desperate to keep her here. What did she want from her? What was it that she thought Sophia had taken from her? Karen's hand tightened around the grip of the gun. "You should have never come here," she hissed. "Now you'll learn the hard way that there are consequences for stepping onto my land." Sophia's mind raced as she struggled to make sense of the situation. But there was no time for reasoning, no time for explanations. She could feel her pulse pounding in her ears, the seconds stretching endlessly as the desert heat bore down on them. And then, just as quickly as it had begun, Karen's voice broke through again, chilling Sophia to her core. "Don't test me." The gun didn't waver. It was still aimed at Sophia's chest, and the fear that had been growing in her chest reached a boiling point. This wasn't just about a confrontation, it was about survival. Sophia's instincts kicked in. She knew now that there was only one thing left to do. The silence of the desert was broken only by the wind, a faint whisper across the dunes, but the tension in the air felt unbearable. Sophia stood frozen, her body trembling, her eyes wide as Karen's gaze remained fixed on her, cold and unrelenting. Every second felt like an eternity, each heartbeat echoing louder in her chest, the pounding rhythm of fear that threatened to drown her. Karen's hand was steady on the gun, her finger resting on the trigger. Sophia's breath caught in her throat, her mind racing, looking for any possible way out. She was too far from the car, too far from safety. The only thing between her and the woman with the gun was sand, and an unbearable distance of understanding. "Please," Sophia whispered again, her voice barely audible over the wind. She didn't know what else to say, the words failing her. There was nothing left to do but hope, and she knew how fragile hope was in a place like this. "Stop moving," Karen barked, her voice sharp and venomous. Sophia froze, her hands instinctively raised, but she couldn't help but take one tiny, desperate step back. And then, in the blink of an eye, it happened. The sound of the gunshot split the air like a crack of thunder, the sharp, deafening report echoing through the vast emptiness of the desert. Sophia gasped, the shockwave of the sound vibrating through her body as she stumbled backward. Her heart stopped for a moment, and then everything slowed, the world spinning, her vision blurring as a searing pain erupted in her side. She looked down, her breath hitching in her chest. The fabric of her shirt was torn, stained with the dark red of her own blood. The pain was sharp, a hot, burning sensation that spread through her body with alarming speed. Her knees buckled, and she fell to the ground, her vision going in and out, the world around her starting to blur. "Sophia!" Karen's voice called from above, distant and muffled. The woman was no longer the figure of authority in Sophia's mind. She was just a shadow, a blur, as Sophia's world tilted and tilted again, spinning out of control. Sophia could taste blood in her mouth, and her chest felt like it was being crushed by the weight of her fear. She tried to lift herself from the sand, but everything felt heavy. Her body refused to cooperate, the wound in her side demanding attention, but she couldn't bring herself to move. She could hear Karen's footsteps now, closer, but they sounded distant, as if Sophia were drifting farther and farther away from the world she knew. The pain was overwhelming, but a deep part of her knew she couldn't stay here, couldn't just lie in the sand. And then, through the haze of her thoughts, Sophia heard the sound of an engine. The roar of the engine in the distance reached Sanam's ears just as she reached the crest of the last dune. The sound of it filled her with a sudden burst of hope, and she squinted against the setting sun, her eyes searching desperately for the source. She hadn't seen Sophia. Not yet. But the engine sound, it was unmistakable, and it made her heart leap in her chest. "Please let it be her," she whispered to herself, urging her legs to move faster, her breath quick and shallow from the exertion. The desert stretched endlessly before her, a vast, unrelenting expanse, but the sound of the engine, the sound of something familiar, was enough to give her a surge of energy. And then she saw it. The shack. Her heart stopped. Sanam's legs moved faster, almost as if on instinct. Her arms flailed for balance as she scrambled toward the structure, her mind racing. She didn't know what had happened, didn't know if Sophia had found help, or if something worse had happened in the moments she had been searching blindly across the desert. But she was close now, so close, and she wasn't going to let anything stop her from reaching her daughter. And then, before she could reach the shack, a figure appeared in the distance. It was her. Sophia was standing there, wobbling on unsteady legs, covered in dirt and blood, her clothes torn, her face pale. "Mom!" Sophia called out, her voice barely above a whisper, but the desperation in it was unmistakable. She swayed on her feet, and Sanam's heart sank as she took in her daughter's condition. Without another thought, Sanam pushed forward, ignoring the burning in her legs, her mind focused only on one thing, reaching Sophia before anything else could happen. As she ran, the sound of the engine behind her faded, but it was replaced by something more ominous. A voice, cold, bitter, and furious, rang out from the shack. "You should have stayed away." The voice belonged to Karen, and her words pierced the air like a knife. "You're too late." Sanam didn't even slow down. She knew that voice. She knew what it meant. Her daughter was hurt, and the woman who had done it was standing right there. She had no time for words. Sanam reached Sophia in moments, her arms wrapping around her daughter as she collapsed against her. The shock of seeing Sophia's blood, the pale look on her face, the sheer terror in her eyes, it was almost too much to bear. "Mom. I'm sorry," Sophia gasped, her voice faint, but the apology tore at Sanam's heart. "Shoo, don't talk," Sanam whispered urgently, holding Sophia tighter as her mind raced. She could feel the warm blood staining her hands, but there was no time to panic. "We need to get you to help, sweetheart," Sanam said, her voice shaky as she turned to look at the shack. Karen stood there, her figure silhouetted against the setting sun, holding the gun with unnerving calmness. "You think you can just walk in here and take what's mine?" Karen spat, her eyes flashing with a dangerous intensity. "This land belongs to me, and anyone who tries to take it will suffer the consequences." Sanam didn't waste a second. With her daughter in her arms, she turned away, but Karen's voice stopped her in her tracks. "You're not leaving here, not without paying for what you've done," Karen shouted, stepping closer, her gun aimed directly at them. Sanam's heart pounded, her blood roaring in her ears. She knew she had no choice but to keep moving. Every instinct told her to protect Sophia, to get her out of harm's way, but Karen's words, her obsession with the land, kept pulling her back. The woman had crossed a line that was unforgivable, and now there was no telling how far she would go to keep her hold on it. Sanam moved faster, clutching Sophia even tighter. She wasn't leaving without her daughter, and she was going to make sure Karen knew that. "I said, get back." Karen's voice rang out again, sharper this time, more frantic. Sanam didn't stop. She had no idea what Karen was capable of, but she wouldn't give her the chance to make good on her threats. She could feel her legs burning, the desperation to get out of the desert, to get away from the woman who had already caused so much damage, urging her on. And then, just as Sanam thought she couldn't take another step, she heard the unmistakable sound of another vehicle approaching from the distance. It was louder now, closer, and as Sanam turned her head, her heart skipped a beat. A second chance. A chance for help. She didn't know who it was, but in that moment, it didn't matter. She pushed forward, the sound of the approaching vehicle growing louder, and she held Sophia even tighter, praying that help was on its way. Karen's voice called after them one final time, cold and filled with venom. "You can run, but you can't escape. You'll never escape." But Sanam didn't stop. Not now. Not ever. She had come too far, and she was going to save her daughter, no matter the cost. Sanam's breath came in ragged gasps as she staggered through the sand, Sophia's weakened body still clutched in her arms. Every step felt like a battle against the crushing weight of the desert, the oppressive heat, and the terror that gnawed at her insides. But she refused to stop. She couldn't. Sophia's life was on the line, and Sanam would fight until her last breath to save her. Behind them, the sound of Karen's footsteps grew louder, more frantic. Sanam could hear the woman's voice calling out, her threats cutting through the air. You can't run forever. Karen yelled, her voice shaking with both rage and fear. You'll never leave here alive. Sanam didn't dare turn around. The fear was already in her gut, like a heavy stone pressing against her chest. She knew Karen would stop at nothing to make her pay for what she perceived as an intrusion. But there was no way in hell that Sanam was going to let her take everything from her. Not now. Not after everything they had been through. Sophia's body sagged against her, barely conscious, her breathing shallow and uneven. Sanam could feel the blood seeping through her daughter's clothes, the warmth of it against her skin, and it drove her forward even harder. We're almost there, sweetheart, she whispered, even though she wasn't sure she believed it herself. Every step felt like an eternity, the landscape stretching endlessly before her. Her muscles burned with exhaustion, and her legs felt like they were going to give out any second, but she refused to stop. Suddenly, the sound of the engine grew louder, more distinct. Sanam's heart leaped in her chest. It was the sound of hope, the sound of someone coming to help. She couldn't see the vehicle yet, but she could hear it, and it was getting closer. Karen's shouts grew louder behind them. Don't think you're getting away from me, she screamed, her voice tinged with madness. You'll never escape. Sanam's mind raced as she pressed on, her pace quickening despite the burning in her legs. She had to make it to the car, to the vehicle that was approaching from the distance. She had to get Sophia to safety. She had to save her daughter. But with each step, Karen's voice loomed closer, and Sanam could feel the darkness of the desert creeping in around her. Every instinct screamed that they weren't safe yet, that there was still one more thing standing between them and survival. Sanam's heart raced as she heard the vehicle screeching to a halt in the distance. But just as she thought help was near, Karen's voice rang out again, sharp and menacing. Stop! Karen screamed, her tone full of fury. This is your last chance. Stop, or I swear I'll kill you both. Sanam's body froze for a moment, the weight of Karen's words sinking deep into her. But she couldn't afford to stop. She couldn't let fear take over now. With all her remaining strength, Sanam pushed forward, clutching Sophia even tighter against her chest, her daughter's limp form a heavy weight she couldn't put down. The pain in her legs was unbearable, but she forced herself to keep going. Behind her, Karen followed. The woman was relentless, determined to catch them, to make them pay for what she believed was her rightful land. Sanam could hear the crackling sound of footsteps in the sand, and every step brought them closer to the confrontation. Sanam reached the car just as Karen was almost upon them. She could see the vehicle, its headlights cutting through the darkness, but Karen was closing in fast. The truck, her salvation, was just within reach. Sanam could feel the engine vibrating beneath her feet as the car's lights blinded her. But before she could make it to the door, Karen's voice rang out again, sharp and filled with malice. Stay right where you are. Karen shouted. I'll make sure you never leave this desert alive. Sanam turned to face her, adrenaline surging as she held Sophia tight against her chest. She could feel the tension in her limbs, the surge of fear mingled with determination. This was it. The final confrontation. Karen stood a few feet away now, the gun still in her hand. Sanam could see the madness in her eyes, the desperate conviction that what she was doing was justified. The woman was standing her ground, and she wasn't about to back down. But neither was Sanam. Stay away from my daughter, Sanam's voice was calm, but it cut through the night air like a blade. I'm not going to let you hurt her anymore. No one is going to stop us from leaving. Karen laughed, a cold, chilling sound that sent a shiver down Sanam's spine. You think you can just walk away? This is my land. You have no right to be here. Sanam's heart thudded in her chest, but she kept her ground, her body stiffening as she prepared for what was to come. She knew Karen wouldn't back down. But she wouldn't, let her win. Suddenly, Karen's expression shifted, a dark look flashing across her face. In that instant, time seemed to slow as she lifted the gun. Sanam's instincts kicked in. Before Karen could pull the trigger, Sanam pushed Sophia behind her, throwing herself in front of her daughter. She heard the sound of the gunshot before she even realized she had moved. Sanam felt the force of the bullet hit her side, a searing pain ripping through her body. It was as if the world shifted beneath her feet, and she collapsed to the sand, the blood beginning to pour from the wound. She gasped, her breath ragged, her heart pounding in her ears. Sophia's scream pierced the night, but Sanam couldn't focus on her daughter. She could only feel the blood seeping from her body, her vision going in and out of focus. "Mom! Mom!" Sophia cried, her voice panicked and full of terror as she knelt beside Sanam, clutching her mother's arm. "Don't leave me. Please don't leave me." Sanam's head swam, her strength fading, but she forced her eyes open, looking at Sophia. She could feel the warmth of her daughter's hand in hers, and despite the overwhelming pain, she managed to squeeze it weakly. "Sweetheart," Sanam gasped, her voice barely a whisper. I'm sorry. I love you, so much." Sophia's tears fell freely as she shook her mother gently. "No, no. You can't, don't say that. You're going to be okay. You have to be okay. We're going to get out of here." Sanam's vision blurred, and for a moment, she felt herself slipping away. But then the sound of another vehicle reached her ears, the second chance she had been waiting for. The headlights cut through the darkness as another truck pulled up, this time stopping right beside them. The figures that stepped out of the truck were a blur at first, but they were here, real, present, and the help they had desperately needed. Sanam couldn't see their faces clearly, but their presence filled her with hope. "Help, please," she whispered, her voice weak. "Sophia, she's hurt too." The figures rushed toward them, quickly taking charge. One of them knelt beside Sanam, applying pressure to her wound while another knelt beside Sophia. The pain was overwhelming, but Sanam managed to smile faintly. "You're going to be okay," one of the men said, his voice firm and comforting. "We're getting you out of here. Both of you." As they lifted Sanam into the truck, Sophia's grip never loosened from her mother's hand. She was safe, and Sanam could finally let herself believe that, despite everything, they would make it through this nightmare. The truck roared to life, the headlights cutting through the darkness as it sped away from the desert, leaving Karen, and the terror she had wrought, far behind. The truck hummed steadily as it rumbled through the dark desert night, the harsh engine noise cutting through the otherwise empty silence. Sanam leaned back against the seat, her body still weak from the bullet wound, but the feeling of motion was soothing. The pain in her side had lessened slightly, though she could still feel the sting every time she breathed too deeply. Sophia, sitting beside her, clung to her hand, her eyes red from crying, her small face pale with exhaustion. But she was safe. They were safe. And for the first time in what felt like days, Sanam allowed herself to let out a shaky breath, the tightness in her chest loosening just a little. The world outside the truck felt miles away. The relentless desert had been replaced by the headlights casting long, thin shadows against the dirt road. A gentle breeze blew through the cracked window, carrying with it the smell of sagebrush and earth, still dry, but far less oppressive than the suffocating heat they had left behind. For a moment, the harsh reality of the past few hours felt distant. Sophia had stopped crying, her body exhausted from the adrenaline and fear, but she hadn't let go of Sanam's hand. Sanam squeezed her daughter's fingers gently, grateful for the comfort of her touch. She could feel the warmth of Sophia's little hand, the only thing that felt real in the chaos. "Are you okay?" Sophia whispered, her voice small, full of concern. Sanam managed a weak smile. "I'm going to be fine, sweetheart. We're both going to be okay." It was hard to believe the words as they left her lips. But there was a peace now, a quiet that hadn't been there for so long. The storm had passed, and the world felt still for the first time in ages. The truck continued its steady journey, and as the miles passed, Sanam's thoughts turned inward, spiraling back to everything that had happened. The images of Karen, her cold, unforgiving eyes and the madness that had driven her to this point, flashed before her mind. She could still hear Karen's voice, that last scream before the gunshot, the raw anger in her words as she threatened to take everything. Sanam closed her eyes, trying to push the memory away, but it clung to her like the heat of the desert. How had it all gotten so out of hand? She was just a mother, a woman trying to protect her daughter. But the twisted obsession of one person had led them here, to the brink of destruction. Sanam's heart ached, not only for herself but for Sophia, who had been caught in the crossfire of a stranger's delusions. She turned her head slightly, watching Sophia as she slept, her face resting on Sanam's arm. The girl had been through so much. The trauma of the gunshot, the terror of being hunted by a madwoman, it would haunt Sophia, just as it would haunt Sanam. They would both carry the scars, physical and emotional, for the rest of their lives. The wound in her side throbbed, but the pain was nothing compared to the weight of the fear and helplessness she had felt in the desert. For the first time, Sanam allowed herself to acknowledge the fear she had been pushing away, fear that she might not be able to protect Sophia, fear that they might not make it out alive. That fear had clung to her every moment, from the moment Sophia had gone missing to the moment Karen had raised the gun. It was a fear that had consumed her, but now, in the safety of the truck, she felt it begin to recede, if only slightly. But no matter how much time passed, how far they traveled from the desert, Sanam knew that the memories would never fade completely. The terror would always be there, lurking in the corners of her mind, a reminder of how fragile their safety had been. As the truck's headlights illuminated the dirt road ahead, Sanam took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the silence settling over them. The past few hours had been a blur of fear and adrenaline, a nightmare that had only recently started to feel like it was slipping out of her grasp. But now, in the cold, quiet night, reality set in. The ordeal wasn't over, there was still so much to process, so much to come to terms with. Sophia stirred beside her, her small voice breaking the stillness. "Mom, do you think we're going to be okay?" Sanam smiled softly, her fingers gently brushing Sophia's hair away from her face. "Yes, sweetheart. We're going to be okay." But even as she said it, she wasn't entirely sure. The words were meant to reassure, to comfort Sophia, but Sanam knew there was a long road ahead of them, a road that wasn't just about the physical recovery from the wound. It was about healing emotionally, mentally, from the trauma they had both endured. The question that lingered in her mind, the one that haunted her as much as the images of Karen's face, was what would become of them now. Would the memory of the desert, the gunshot, and the fear ever leave them? Would Sophia ever be able to fully recover from the trauma, from the weight of knowing that someone had wanted to harm her? And would Sanam ever be able to forgive herself for putting her daughter in such a dangerous situation? The answers weren't clear. She didn't know how they would move forward, or how long it would take for the fear to dissipate. But she did know one thing for certain: she had fought for her daughter's life. She had fought with every ounce of strength in her body, and she had won. As the truck drove deeper into the night, away from the desert, away from the madness, Sanam found herself holding on to that truth. They were alive. They had survived. And no matter what came next, that was something worth holding on to. "We're going to be okay," Sanam whispered again, this time to herself as much as to Sophia. The words held more weight now, as they echoed in the quiet of the truck. They had made it through the storm, and now, they would rebuild. Together. As the truck drove on, the desert fading behind them, Sanam closed her eyes for a moment, letting the wind whip through her hair. The night was still, but for the first time in so long, Sanam felt like she could finally breathe.